Hey everybody, welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in their respective journeys through this thing we call life. On today's episode, which will be our last as we take a little short summer break. But today's episode, we're going to have a little fun with a Q&A. And so we do have our full contingent of brothers today, which is nice. And we're going to have a little fun with this thing. So to get us kicked off, our first question is, do you think John Morant is being held to a different standard because of his celebrity status and our gun culture created by Second Amendment enthusiasts than that of those who refuse any meaningful change to today's gun laws? And before we get into our responses to this, just for anybody who may not be aware, John Morant is an NBA basketball player for the Memphis Grizzlies, and he has had two separate incidents where he has kind of flashed a gun. He was suspended, I believe it was 8 games the first time. And then he turned around and did it again shortly thereafter. And this time he's been suspended for the first 25 games of the coming season. So just kind of a brief background on that again for anybody who may not be aware of who he is. So, Brother Ray, as what has become customary, we will let you get us kicked off with question number one.
Okay. Hey, you know what? I'm going to say it's easy to say yes that he is being held to a different standard. Because I looked it up. Tennessee does not have uh, they don't have a gun law where you are required to have a permit. It's open carry, or whether it's open carry or concealed. So it's real easy to say yes that he is being singled out. Because the biggest problem is, one, he's a young, rich black male, and he is the face of the franchise. No matter how you look at it, he is the face of the Memphis Grizzlies franchise. But I have to say, again, it's kind of hard to say whether he's being singled out or not. But for me, it all comes back down to accountability. He got in trouble for it in the first place. You get in trouble, you get suspended for 8 games because you brandish a gun in a nightclub, even though you were in a private area. And then you turn around after you've made all these apologies and supposedly went and got treatment and everything. And you turn around and do the same doggone thing again. And again, even though it's not against the law for him to openly carry a weapon, you are the face of a franchise and you are one of the bigger names in the league. So it's hard for me to say yes that he was being singled out, because again, that self accountability has to come into place somewhere along the line. But that's my initial thoughts on it. So I'll yield the floor to whoever may want to go next.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's necessarily his celebrity per se that caused this, and I don't think he's being held to a different standard because of it. If anything, he's being held to a different standard because he plays for the NBA, and I think that any player in the NBA would have been suspended for doing this. In fact, quite the opposite. To me, I think his celebrity status, right, or rather his talent, actually saved him. Because y'all know how it goes, right? Had he been some dude who was on the bubble regarding even making the team or being on the team, he was at the end of the bench, he would have been cut 2 minutes after the video hit Instagram. Right. So the fact that John Morant is actually a celebrity, and well, not a celebrity, well, he is a celebrity, but the fact that he's talented, he's the face of the franchise, and one of the better players in the league and an upcoming talent and all those different things. If anything, that saved him from being cut. So yeah, no, so in that case, yeah, he is being held to a different standard, one that saved him, if you ask
Right.
me. So
Yeah, but I look at it this way too, Kev. I mean, and I don't mean to jump in the front of everybody, but yeah, if it had been somebody at the end of the bench, we wouldn't have known. Uh, they wouldn't have received any notoriety anyway because nobody knows who in the hell they are. Where
yeah, but
this
they still would have
dude,
been held accountable regardless.
Possibly. I mean, because if you see this guy on Instagram video or what have you with a gun, this is gonna be like, okay, it's just another young black guy with a gun. You know, you don't know that this guy is a NBA player. Where John Morant, yeah, you know, he's an NBA player. He's a starter. He is a star. You
The
know,
reason
but
that
I
argument
see your
doesn't
point.
work for me is the fact that regardless of whether he's at the end of the bench or not, somebody knows he's in the NBA, and somebody's going to say something, regardless of he could be the least known player in the NBA, but
Mhm.
somebody knows he's in the NBA, and it's going to. It may not make national news the way John Moran did, but it's going to get back to the league, to the head
And
office.
I
So
see that point. And
that's the whole point to that.
right, and because my thing was, you know, if it was somebody else, it wouldn't. If it was somebody at the end of the bench, it wouldn't get as much traction as it did
And
with
it
John
wouldn't,
Morant because of who
but
he
it would
is.
have been
But
known.
yeah,
So
absolutely, I agree with that.
Let me hop in before they start arguing some more. You know, we got
Oh,
10
you
more
know what?
questions. We got 10 more questions, you know what I'm saying? So let me get in right quick. Um, so I believe that this is a situation where two things can be true simultaneously. I do absolutely believe that Ja Morant is being held to a different standard for obvious reasons, but at the same time, I'm glad he is because I think it's important um, because of his star, because of his background and everything. It's important to get that thing under control. So I'm not upset about it. But there have been several NBA players that brandished guns on social media in a legal sense. One of the big examples being Chris Anderson, who was Birdman, who played for the Heat, the Nuggets, and a couple of other. So he did, and there was absolutely no discourse nor consequence to brandishing guns. And so to give some background, the initial situation wasn't so much that it was a gun. That was still bad, but it was the fact that they had to check and see because Colorado does not have the same gun laws as Tennessee. So the investigation was to see if any laws had been broken by him brandishing a gun in a public place. Although it was a private get together, it was still a public place in the state of Colorado, in the city of Denver, or it was somewhere near Denver. But so that was what that investigation was pending on, and it got mishmashed against a whole bunch of different other elements, which, fair or unfair, they started to bring in when they had the thing on court with Shannon Sharp. They brought in a fight that he had with a young man that was playing on his basketball court that hadn't been adjudicated yet. And then there was another incident where someone claimed that there were red dots pointed at them from a car that Ja Morant was in with his best friend. So all of those situations piled up and made it a concerning situation. But with the second situation, it was optics. He did nothing illegal. It was optics. And so I do believe that is being held to a different standard for several reasons. But at the same time, I'm glad about it. I'm glad that somebody is holding him to that standard. But it's definitely a different standard because of his celebrity status when we can point out for Congress people that send out Christmas cards where they're brandishing guns in the Christmas cards. So it is a different standard, in my opinion. Sorry. Let me make that real clear. My opinion.
Yeah. When I saw this question, I thought about the NBA don't have no agreement with the NRA. So when you look at how this with John Morant's story in the NBA, and you compare how Congress handles gun reform, Congress is in bed with the NRA. So of course they're going to be slow to move. The NBA don't have no, they don't have no partnership with the NRA. And I think because the NBA does not have that, they had to do something for the second incident. Yeah, is he being targeted? Absolutely, because of his celebrity status, because of the NBA, because the NBA is trying to have an image that separates from gun violence. When you look at all the four major sport leagues, the NBA is probably the most conscious when it comes to social justice. So yeah, they were definitely going to say something. Then when you look back to when Gilbert Arenas was here in DC, he lost his job basically for bringing his gun to the locker room. Again, based on what John was saying is different based on what laws you are in. Yeah, if he wasn't an NBA player, probably wouldn't nobody thought nothing else of it because he's in the state of Tennessee. So if he was at a party and he wasn't in the NBA, it wouldn't have been a second thought about it. But because he is in the NBA, and the NBA is, socially justice aware about things like guns, and they don't have an agreement with the NRA. Yeah, they did have to respond, and I do believe he's being targeted. I think again because of who he's connected to, not necessarily because of being a black man, but I think just because he's in the NBA, and they know that too. They have those what morality clauses that the NBA players, the NFL players, they have to sign those. That hey, there's certain things you cannot do when you're representing this organization. So same thing when we was in the military. It's just there were some things we just couldn't do until we got out of uniform. So, but that's how I see it when I saw this question.
And they didn't even punish him for the gun per se, right? They called it conduct detrimental to the league, right? And so, yeah, the gun played a part in it. It was because of what he did, but at the same time, it wasn't because he had a gun per se. Because again, like we've all stated, it's not illegal. He didn't do anything illegal. So, yeah. Right.
Yeah, frozen.
Yeah,
I think he's
up there. He is.
There you go.
yeah. I tell you, man, it's electronics. And anyway, real quick. So yeah, of course, I believe that he's being held to a different standard. One, because of his celebrity, and two, like you all stated, the job that he does and the attention that it brings on the brand of the NBA, right? And so those morality clauses are in place for a reason. And I think, when I first saw it, my question was, why, right? Other than the fact that you can, but why? And who's surrounding him, or advising him? And I guess a lot of times, if you have a group of guys that you hang out with and you're the one funding everything, people will fall back, right? But he's definitely been held to a different standard, and I think, like John Snow said, glad he is. Hopefully, it'll get his attention, and he'll decide, what's really important to him, and move forward with his life. But the gun culture in America has its challenges, and people live through it every day. And kids are scared to go to school because of it. In fact, I know I was in Arizona playing golf, and all through a Circle K one morning, had a cup of hot chocolate on my way to the course. And if I walked in the store, he had the biggest pistol I had ever seen strapped to his hip. And I'm like, wow. And I realized, open carry rule.
We lost you, Rod. You have some technical difficulties.
Oh.
You were. So.
There he go. There he go. There he go.
Yeah, I want to jump in here real quick before you go to the next question, Kevin. as a part of what Rod said, it hit me. One of the things I think John needs to do is we all know he needs to surround himself with better people, his friends, namely, but also his parents. His parents, it seems to me like they play a big role in this. And the one incident that John mentioned where he's playing ball or what, or something happened where his mom made a phone call to him, and he comes and shows up, and an altercation happens. It's like, okay, why would mom do that? And then the dad, it's like the parents, they're like trying to be his friend instead of trying to be his parent. And instead of saying, hey, son, you got a lot to lose. You got all these millions of dollars coming in. You need to surround yourself with better people. And, you just can't do everything that your friends are able to do. But that's, I'm sure we'll get to something like that along the way as well. So go ahead, bro.
All right, question number 2. What do you believe is the real reason America cannot resolve its integration policy challenges, especially given the country was built by immigrants?
I would say it's just how we pick and choose people. It's funny how we got some immigrants that can stay and some immediately have to go back. Anybody come from Haiti, man, they don't mess around. They put them on a plane to go back. They don't even put them back on a boat. Um, the reason why I don't think that the reason why America doesn't really want to deal with that, they still want they still want that opportunity to pick and choose who comes and who comes and who goes. Because again, like you said, this country was built on immigrants. So guess what? Some of the smartest people that we know working in the United States are immigrants right now. When I worked at NIH, we had a ton of people that could not be citizens, but guess what? We issued them a green card because they came to work on different diseases. So I think the reason why we want to leave that opportunity to pick and choose who we want to come into the country. That's just my opinion.
And make no mistake about it, first of all, if you're not Native American, we're all immigrants to this country. So let me point that out too. Every
Thanks.
last one of us, right? White, black, doesn't matter. If you are not Native American, you are an immigrant to this country. So, um,
Well,
well, I guess, go ahead.
okay. I'll try and jump in real quick and answer the question. Well, at least from my point of view, to me, it's like the Republicans. I'm not going to say the white population, but the Republicans are just doing everything that they can do to prevent from becoming a minority. Why is it that we have to have border security with the southern border, but yet we have another country to the north and we're not worrying about the Canadians? They can come and go as they please, but if somebody's coming in from Mexico, which are primarily brown skinned people, then no, we got to build a wall. Why is it one is good for what's good for the goose is good for the gander? If it's good for the southern border, it should be the same for the northern border. But that's my take on that.
How you doing down there, Rod? Are you, I don't know if you wanted
Yeah,
to.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
All right. I'm trying my fourth device, so we'll see how this works out. But yeah, so Kevin was right. If you're not Native American, then you're an immigrant to this country, some way, somehow. It almost appears that once some immigrants landed here and built great lives, they took ownership of the country as they should. They loved the opportunity that they received by coming to America, and now I want to keep others out because I don't want them to ruin my country. But it's just mind blowing that there has been uh, no serious attempt at passing some immigration policy uh, that holds everyone accountable, and that's the key. Uh, Everyone playing by the same rules. It's like we don't want a level playing field, right? But I'll tell you this: let there be no immigrants allowed to come to the country, you know, and see what happens to the infrastructure of America at that point. I think that, you'll find that people who immigrate here are willing to do things because they recognize this as being a great opportunity versus those that are born and raised here that take so much for granted, and I'm sure we've all been witness to it. Uh, but I think that in lies part of the reason that we can't get some type of solid immigration policy put forward and voted on and passed. Who's holding the politicians accountable?
Totally agree. Totally agree. There have been some videos that have showed how the workspaces in Florida since they passed,
Yeah.
it's showing how they don't have people to do the farming or the construction. And, it's one of those rare times where I like what they said. Most of the times the bigotry and the racism does not supersede the greed, but this is one of those cases where it did supersede their greed, and they're going to pay a big price for it. But I think the history of the United States, obviously, growing up in Texas, we had to learn Texas history. And even as a little boy, it didn't sit right with me that, how did these guys go down and they were in the Alamo, and the Mexican government allowed them to stay. And then when the Mexican government said, well, hey, you've been here long enough, you're going to have to pay some taxes, do something to contribute to our economy or something. You can't just be hanging out here. And now all of a sudden, because they told them, no, we want it just because we think we deserve it, they some kind of heroes. Like, it was always the weirdest thing to me. And to think of all of this land and space that was stolen from others 2 times over, because obviously the Mexicans weren't the original inhabitants of Mexico, so it was stolen from those original. But in 1921, Congress came up with a law that limited how many people could immigrate from the U.S. Now, obviously, it was unlimited for European countries and white Anglo-Saxon countries, but the limitations were on all non-white countries. And so one of the issues that we have coming back to it is, obviously we understand that the Air National Guard has equity in the Border Patrol program, and we have people that work that. And when you look at the numbers, you start to realize that there's a lot of propaganda involved. I'm not going to say it's all false, but they make immigrants coming from African countries and from Mexico and South American countries so dangerous, and they're so nefarious, when what they're doing is something that's legal according to NATO and the Geneva, Convention, called asylum. But they make it so dangerous. But yet, if you walked in here over here from Germany, or if you come from the UK or Scotland or something, oh, it's cool, man. Come on over here, man. We'll give you an easy path, a easy path to citizenship, dual citizenship, all of that. So I think what's happening is the real people, boots on the ground, that are doing the work are fighting hard so that they don't have the opportunity to get away with the shenanigans. And trust me, I talk to a lot of us, and a lot of us believe some of the propaganda without the facts layered in there. And it would be sobering if we understood the nefarious beginnings of why certain countries are looked at as harmful as far as immigration goes. And we know it's the same reason why we're looked at that same way. So I think a lot of it is that Congress would prefer a very restrictive one to non-white countries and maintain the free flow of Anglo-Saxon countries, and the people on the boots on the ground are fighting hard to keep them from getting what they actually want.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that Democrats, and I've mentioned this before because somehow something about immigration came up on one of our other episodes, and I mentioned something that I'm going to say again here. Democrats seem to be afraid of the topic, right? And they don't seem to know exactly what to do, and it's been that way for years. And not knowing what to do has kind of led to indecision. It's led to bad policy. And then on the Republican side, they just, as you all have already stated, right? They just really don't even want immigrants here, out of fear and other things. And so they have come up with all these draconian policies, and it's been that way again for years. Because we have a history in this country of policy issues. And I get that there has to be economic, legal, and security considerations. I get all of that, but it still shouldn't be this challenging. And John kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I think one of the issues is that people with a microphone, right? People like Trump, instill fear by using the ignorance of many Americans, and then and lead them to believe that many of these asylum seekers are coming over here to commit crimes, take jobs, or just insert whatever other lie that Trump and all the others have used, and then that allows them to have the support of their constituents when they create these draconian policies because they've instilled and created fear, um, which shouldn't even be there to begin with. Um, and meanwhile, again, Democrats are kind of stuck on stupid, not knowing what they should do, why they should do it, or how they should do it. And let's make something clear: the majority of these asylum seekers are coming over here to seek protection from persecution, political instability, and to escape human rights violations, right, in their home countries. It's not easy for them to just pick up, leave their homes, their possessions, in many cases, leave their families behind to come to some foreign country with nothing and start all over again. And then some of them had amazingly successful lives before circumstances changed that dictated that they come over here. And that oftentimes the issues that led to them being asylum seekers, coming over here were reasons that were condoned or just flat out caused by the United States, right? We destabilize countries and regions through trade agreements, through sanctions, through supporting and even installing corrupt regimes. And then, so then not only do we cause these issues, we add insult to injury by saying, you know what, now you can't come into this country, right? Stay in your country to be imprisoned, to be impoverished, possibly killed, due to a situation that we caused. So yeah, we caused the situation that's making you have to come over here, but we're not going to let you in here, right? Which makes zero sense to me. But that's again, it's a lot of that is just born from racism and hatred and white supremacy. And so that's my take on that. All right. Question number 3. Have you personally seen or felt any impact of the administration's Build Back Better strategy for America? If yes, what has been the impact? If not, why do you think that is the reason?
I'll go. Have any of you seen anything? Because I sure as hell haven't. Um, and the reason I believe that is because a lot of the things that would have benefited the poor population were cut. In order to get any kind of infrastructure done, for Biden to get anything done, he had to give up a lot of what he wanted, and basically, it was like he got pennies on the dollar. So to me, it was just like once again, and I hate to. No, I don't. I don't hate it. I'm gonna say it. The Republican Party, once again, they do everything that they can do to make sure that the lower and middle class folks stay poor, um, that they have zero benefits, that they pay higher taxes than they do for themselves and for the top 1%. That's how I feel about it, And so, yeah, I said it. So go ahead, whoever wants to go next.
Actually, I'm always critical of politicians, and I'll continue to be. Of both the Democrats and the Republicans. But in this one particular instance, I'm going to give credit where I think credit is due. And that infrastructure bill was passed bipartisan. in 2021, I believe, and it added over $1 trillion to rebuilding the infrastructure, clean water, making sure that every home has an opportunity to get high speed internet and all that sort of stuff. So not only did the bill pass, but it actually has teeth. For once, they've done something that has teeth, right? And I've actually seen some of these things put into place. And they've actually, the Biden administration has done a good job of making sure that they have infrastructure coordinators, right? People who are tracking and measuring what's being done, how it's being done, so people can be held accountable. Oftentimes, these things get passed and there's no accountability, right? It's just like, okay, we passed this bill, give this state this much money, or give all the states the equal amount of money and let them do whatever they want with it, right? They have free reign. And then in those instances, these states are only going to take care of the wealthy generally, right? They're not going to take care of the poor neighborhoods, but they're not being allowed to do that in this instance. And they have a way to be able to see, they have a website for you to be able to see exactly what's being done with this money. And not to mention, um, again, I personally seen some of the roads being fixed, and Felicia and I travel a lot, and you can just kind of see where some of this money is going. And again, if you look it up and you see, okay, this amount of money is going to this project, and then you turn around and see that this thing is actually being done, right? They have a website for people to sign up for like high speed internet, and so far, like 10,000 people have signed up for it, and many of them have already gotten the high speed internet that otherwise wouldn't have had an opportunity to do it. So all these things, this is, again, you're not going to hear me giving a lot of credit to politicians ever, because most times I don't feel they deserve it. But I do think in this particular instance, they actually did something bipartisan. It took a little bit of doing for sure to get it done, and every dollar is being tracked. I don't know what's so different about this, but again, they are doing some things different and right with this particular infrastructure bill that includes a lot of different things that are happening, and it's proof. There's proof that these things are happening. So that's my response to that.
Right. And I hear you, and I don't
Bruh,
just
bruh, you
I
do
don't
not have
disagree
to
with you.
refute everything
No,
I
no, no.
say.
I'm not refuting anything. Only thing I'm saying is, that's the one thing that I did see. I mean, you did see the infrastructure, that, but I think
That's
there
what
was
the Build
there were other,
Better Back was about. That's the
right,
question. It says,
but there,
have you
but there
personally
were
the
other. I
Build
think there were
Better
other
Back?
things in there, wasn't there? Other
Yeah,
than
and I already
where
said
there
those
were
things
things
are
that
being
got cut.
tracked and done as
Uh,
well. The
Okay,
water, the
okay,
high-speed internet, that's all being
oh,
done. It's being tracked.
okay,
There's proof that it's happening. There are families
okay,
who are taking advantage of this.
okay. I believe you.
Ray said, "Okay, I believe you."
I believe you.
Eesh.
Hey, no, Kev, your answer was so eloquent. It's like, so I'm a I'm a black man in my late 40s, man, and my answer to any question about, has this president or has this impacted you? And I'd be like, nah, man, the struggle been real my whole life, man. They ain't really impacted me like that. But specifically to the Build Back Better, and I'm aware of it, and I probably would want to get a little more knowledgeable about it, but there have been big changes here, namely in my neighborhood. I'm in a high rent district, so I mean, it didn't make no sense that our streets are that bad, but they've redone everything right around where I'm at, just totally redone it. And it started in 22. So it was after it was passed. I don't know. I know all of y'all been in this area before, but what they've done right around Bowling Air Force Base is amazing. And it's all recent and new. And, just throughout DC and all through Virginia, I've seen a lot. When we were doing we had to do some superintendent meetings. So they were doing them through Zoom late last year. And they were talking about all of the families in our community that were able to get high-speed internet and were able to get upgrades. They talked about all that. So, yeah, I've actually seen that. And again, as Kev eloquently said, this was a bipartisan, effort. This wasn't, give Biden all the credit for it. And I do think, look, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. He's real milk toast to me, but I think we sleep on the fact that Biden is quietly getting a lot of stuff done politically. So he's a career politician and he's getting things done in a political way without a lot of fanfare and all this talking, but getting stuff done quietly. Still, I maintain I'm not a fan, but you got to give credit where credit is due. He's doing the politician thing. We're so used to the bombasticness of his predecessor that I think sometimes we don't see that he's getting some quality wins, even though he falls twice a week publicly. So,
I agree. I actually do also think that he's yeah, I'm going to be a critic a lot of times, but I agree with you. I do think he has gotten some things done, you know. So.
Yeah, I, so I've seen some of the results of some of the initiatives that are part of the Build Back Better plan. But again, I'm like probably most of you all as far as skepticism regarding some of our public servants, because far too often the partisanship gets in the way and clouds the goodness that's attempting to be done. So so the fact that the bill got passed, a lot of major projects going on to highways and roads, of course the high speed internet, fiber showing up all over, and then I know, because I have a senior citizen with mom, but that she can get free access to internet because of her age and socioeconomic status. Uh, and so so things are happening, good things are happening, but 2 points. One, I don't think enough people who can be or are positively impacted by what's included in that plan actually knows what's in the plan.
Agreed.
Right? So they don't know whether it's impacting them positively or otherwise. And then two, I do still think that it is a shame, even though it was a bipartisan uh, bill passed, that you still have some hardliners uh, from the party that's not in power to go against what's included because they want to be in power. And that's just the ebb and flow of US politics, unfortunately. And they are banking on the fact that the everyday average American citizen won't read and learn for themselves and come up with their own original thoughts, ideas, and suggestions and opinions. So they use their platform to try to get across what they want the narrative to be, whether it's true or not. And that's the unfortunate part. But I have seen the positive benefits of the infrastructure deal, which is the Build Back Better plan.
Right.
Yeah. Piggyback on what Rob was saying, and Kevin too. Joe Manchin was the one that was holding it up. Matter of fact, he derailed it the first time, and he's in the same party with Joe Biden. But again, it was like, hey, my state, West Virginia, if we don't get X, Y, and Z, I'm like, dude, first of all, when you look at West Virginia, no offense to them, but when you're talking about one of the poorly educated states in the United States, and Rod just mentioned about not being able to read what's actually in the bill for yourself. I remember when I was doing my study for the Affordable Health Care Act, we heard this when people say, oh, I don't want that Obamacare. Give me the Affordable Health Care Act. And, these are the same people, and so now you got Joe Manchin was like holding this up. And again, piggybacking off what Rob was saying, I almost thought that he took this as this is the opportunity for people to know that I have the power to hold this up. Everybody else on his side of the aisle was like, yes, we got to get it done. But it's like, nope, let me just get my 15 minutes of fame as a politician and let me hold it up. And then when he got his little concessions, guess what he did? He agreed to it. Wasn't that many more than what he wanted, but he got what he wanted. He held it up. And I say that to say, here's somebody who, was elected by 300,000 people versus somebody who was elected by a couple hundred or a couple million people, and he's holding it up for the process. So I think it's going to be better for America. Like you said, if the jobs are being created there for the blue collar workers, for opportunities for people who, like you said, maybe not going to go to college, but build back better is just going to make their communities better. And I think when people see their community that the money's putting back into them, it's like church, right? People's like, I'm gonna give as long as I can see something going back to the church. It's true. It's like
Right.
if I can see something happening in the church and not going in the pastor's pocket, and I think that's going to be the same thing with just build back better. I think when people start seeing the changes in their community, they're going to be excited about it.
Cool. All right. So, question number 4. What do you think would be the fallout of term limits for all elected officials, good or not so good? Should there be a national movement towards supporting one or the other position?
Yeah, so the fallout first. So one is that I think it would probably encourage more people to serve or want to serve.
Yeah.
And while there may be some things lost in translation as far as historical knowledge and perspective on things, which could come across as a lack of stability. I do think that, new and fresh ideas is probably what this country needs. So the way that I look at it, you have folks in Congress, as an example, that have been there forever. And then you have people who are old enough to be their grandkids with new and fresh ideas who've had different experiences, wanting to think outside the box to come up with new, innovative ways to solve problems. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. What approach would you take to solving this problem for the majority of the people that it's impacting? And unfortunately, I think a lot of those ideas are being lost because people choose not to put them forward because the older folks, the older generation that's there and in power, don't think like them, can't think like them because they didn't grow up like them. So, so I do think that term limits is one of the things that that we should address in our political systems, as well as some other things. The whole idea of lifetime appointments and things. We won't even go down that road, but I do think that term limits is something that we should take a look at, and there should be a national conversation about it, the goodness and otherwise, to discuss if now's the time to really address that. So that's my thought.
Yeah, John, I don't know if you were about, I saw that you were about to jump in before Rod, so I was gonna go, but I'll let you go first.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate you. And I think the fallout of the term limits for all elected officials would be that all of this stagnant blood would fall out of Congress and out of the. I'm absolutely for term limits, because all of us have served in the military, and we've all been impacted by people that hold wield unusual power because they know where the bodies are buried, the skeletons are, all of that stuff. So, um, and what people like to point to is, well, think about this career politician and all that they accomplished, blah, 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 blah. But, that's not enough to offset. If you got one that did a lot of good, that's not enough to offset a couple of hundred more that are just in there doubling down on silly ideas and all this, that, and the other. So I think a term limit, and obviously, if you start out with one, it will need to be a little generous than maybe I would like, but you start out with some term limits and you can start to refresh, and you don't have the same faces running this side of the party or that side of the party or these committees. And I think we also need to get to a point where we're getting the idea of these emerging generations, because I used to say all the time when I was at the top post in my organization, I was like, all the fresh ideas ain't coming from me. I'm coming to you. I'm the one that has the institutional knowledge, but for us to go forward, it's going to take your know-how. Like, I'm still talking about doing stuff on paper and printers and stuff, and y'all doing it electronically. So I'm out here looking crazy talking about my experience. So I think that we should really start a national movement. I think a lot of times we talk about, well, it's Constitution and the forefathers. Man, the forefathers was back in the 1700s. They didn't have lifespans as long. They didn't have technology, all of that. Let's stop holding ourselves to that standard as if it's some mythical, magical. It was practical at the time that they wrote it, and now some common sense changes make sense now. And that's my opinion on it.
And man, you know what? Before I even get into that portion of it, something you just said, I literally just had a conversation with someone about that today, right? And you said it perfectly, right? The Constitution is 234 years old, right? And I was having this conversation with regards to the Second Amendment. I'm not going to, digress for too long on this, but that's exactly right, right? And we had a conversation earlier about the Second Amendment when we were talking about John Morant. They did, first of all, the quote unquote forefathers, which I don't like that name. They were a bunch of redneck white supremacist racists anyway, but they did what was good for them at that time, 234 years ago, right? Things have changed. Technology has changed. The economy has changed. Back then, there were like 3 million people. There's 334 billion people in this country now, right? There's all these different things. And so it gets on my nerves when people talk about, oh, it's my Second Amendment right. Well, they did that then. And really, there's an argument for what the Second Amendment really was. Because if you ask me, when you read it, it was more applicable to the military and I think people kind of misread what it really was supposed to represent. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to kind of um yeah. Nah, what I say? Did I say that wrong?
Yeah, you
Did I
said
say billion?
billion.
Yeah, you're right. My bad.
Got
But yeah,
excited.
with regards to this, yes, I am, and I am sure all five of us agree. And I know we've had this conversation before. Absolutely, I'm for term limits, right? When something that I don't know that a lot of people know is that anytime there's been a poll done of Americans, any group of Americans, anywhere, whether they were black, white, does not matter. Anytime there's been a poll done asking Americans how they felt about term limits, over 80% every time are for it. but you don't. That's not something that they publicize a lot, right? Politicians don't want you to know that, but Americans overwhelmingly want term limits, overwhelmingly, and which also speaks to the fact that the approval rating of Congress is consistently below 20%, right? So if we had term limits, my guess is that, but you know what? The other part to that is too, even though it's consistently below 20%, their approval rating, the re-election rate for Congress is over 95%. And why is that? Why is that? That's because the people, the incumbents have money, right? They have these advantages over challengers. So even though they have these low approval ratings, they have so much more going for them to be able to get reelected. That would go away, right? To by and large, that would go away if we had term limits. And then you would have, and I think Rod touched on this, right? You would kind of have ordinary people who would be able to kind of get in office and make their mark to do something. The other thing that I think would go away if we had term limits is, when you think about it, the fact that these incumbents have so much money and they're able to win so often, it's because of PACs, right? And super PACs, right? These lobbyists and special
There
interest
it
groups,
is.
they have these politicians in their back pocket because of it, right? And so that's why they're able to win time and time and time again. So you would see that go away as well if we had term limits. So those are just a few things that corruption. A lot of the corruption, of course, there's always going to be some corruption, but I think to a huge degree, you would see a lot of that corruption go away if we had term limits.
Yeah, I mean, you got your pros and cons. Going back to what you were saying about the politicians with the big pot of money. You hate to see people who are good doing good for the community to be put on term limits, but at the same time, especially when you're dealing with Congress, how can the president be on term limits but Congress not be on term limits? It just, to me, they have to be on term limits. Uh, Now again, they're gonna push it back down. The state's gonna be different. Virginia governor has a one term limit. You're governor for 4 years and you gotta get out. Other states is 2 terms. Um, so yeah, and like you said, we all agreed that I would like term limits because even the good people that are doing positive things, hopefully they will generate new ideas and better people to come after them to continue the work. Like you said, I think because somebody like Steny Hoyer here in Maryland. I mean, Steny Hoyer, the last 2 times he's run, he don't even have debates. I mean, nobody even challenges him. Now he's doing a great work, but at the same time, you've been in Congress, 50 something years. Nobody's gonna challenge you, but at the same time, you're doing some great work. But again, why can't you? And he kind of did that with Wes Moore. We have the governor of mayor now. I'm sorry, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. Steny Hoyer kind of brought him along and kickstarted him to be now the new mayor. I'm sorry, the new governor of Maryland. So yeah, I would like to see term limits. And I think what will help is those that are actually doing good work. You're going to do good work faster because you're going to realize your time is limited and you're going to do your best to make sure you impact the community as much as possible.
Yep, I agree.
Well, I'll jump in real quick. I mean, we're all in agreement. There definitely needs to be term limits. The one thing I would, because what we see all the time right now, the way things are right now, is that these politicians are voting for power. Where if we get somebody new in there and there's term limits, we hope that they would be voting what's in the best interest of the people. And that's what's been missing all these years. With a lot of these politicians, they're just basically voting down party lines just because they're just trying to hold on to power versus trying to do what's in the best interest of the people. But that's all I got on that one, fellas.
All right, cool. We'll move on to question number 5. Why do you think the debt ceiling was not a huge concern when Congress was voting for tax cuts for corporations during the previous administration?
Because of the
I,
amount of
I
money they were getting put in their pockets.
Yeah, I'll be really quick on this, honestly, and I'm just going to quote something by Elizabeth Warren. She said that the debt ceiling has become a tool used by only one side to try to advance their extremist views that they otherwise could not get through the democratic process, and we've got to put a stop to it. And I agree with her 100% on that. And
Absolutely.
that's what continues to happen. Republicans are just using it because they can't take those ideas that they have and get them through the democratic process. So then they hold up the debt ceiling until they can get some of those things incorporated. They can get buy off on that. Like Biden had to say, okay, well, I got to give. It's a give and take, right? I got to give them some of this and take away some of this if we want this debt ceiling passed. And they hold the debt ceiling hostage until that happens. And so I think the debt ceiling is something that definitely needs to be. It's going to happen. So why even talk about it, right? Like you have to. We have no choice, right? The debt ceiling is simply something that allows the government to finance existing legal obligations that Congresses and presidents of both parties have made in the past. So we don't need this whole process to happen to raise the debt ceiling. It's going to happen, right? And so I agree with her. I think it's something that needs to be done away with. And I don't know if that totally answers the question, but that's my thought on it.
I'm like, what? I mean, what new ideas has the GOP come up with in the last 15 years? I mean, when you talk about healthcare, when you talk about the Build Back Better plan, what ideas have they come up with that actually benefits everybody in America? It seemed like their agenda, is strictly toward the big companies. And same thing, we can go back to when Trump was in office and you gave this huge tax break to major corporations,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they said, oh well, because we got this tax break, we're going to give out jobs. Well, what, 18 months later, Microsoft laying off 15,000 people, Facebook laying off 10, 15,000 people. So we give them the tax break under the assumption that you're going to pass those savings or you're going to create jobs for lower class people. But instead, you started laying people off once you got those huge tax breaks. They did the same thing when Obama bailed out the airlines, when you bailed out the auto industry. It's like, when are we going to actually put together a plan that's actually going to be beneficial for everyone, not just the wealthy, and I think as far as the debt ceiling, like you're saying, Kevin, they don't come up with any new ideas. So they got to hold the new ideas that are out there. They got to hold them hostage because they don't come up with any. We still waiting for them to come up with the plan to change the Affordable Health Care Act. And that hasn't happened. What they're going to do is, guess what? They just, okay, now that the health crisis is over, we just going to unenroll all these people on Medicaid. So it's just like, I don't know. To me, it's just like, it's only one agenda. Let's just make rich people richer. And whatever plans that whatever comes up where we can hold that up so the average person can't get ahead, that's what we'll do. We'll just hold that up as long as possible.
You said it seems to you, B. Nah, that's fact, bro. What you said is fact. It doesn't just seem to you. That's fact.
I'm just trying to keep it as a family show. That's all.
Yeah, but no, it's fact, man. I mean, and you stole. Well, now you didn't steal. You spoke exactly on what I was going to talk about. Like, they talk about how they're so fiscally conscious and all this, but when they pass that 40% tax cut for major corporations that have a net of over 100,000 a year, so and I mean, from 35 to 21%, it caused a $2 trillion deficit in the economy. And they gave temporary tax cuts to middle class, working class folks that they rescinded And because of the movement of giving it and taking it away, it caused our tax rates to go up. So now theirs went down, ours went up. It caused this huge deficit. And then when we get to a debt ceiling, they come to the table talking about we got to cut some costs. But y'all created costs that are making that debt ceiling go higher. But I think with them, and this question is about the debt ceiling, man. Let me stay in pocket. But the GLP, man, they got some draconian, dark, twisted ideas and concepts that are based on the fears of people that are afraid of the birth dearth and afraid of America becoming a truly multicultural by just looking at its citizens' country. They're afraid of all of these things, but when you bring that stuff out to the light, it does not survive in open debates, racism and all this other stuff that they're fueling their party with. So, yeah, I said it. But yeah, the debt ceiling is for all of us, man. They should take it off the table. Like, this is ridiculous that, like, if the Republican Party has such a great platform to stand on, then stand on that. Stop using all these tricks and all this other stuff, and just stand on these great ideas. That's why your party is old and dying, because nobody is invigorated by these draconian measures that you're. So take the debt ceiling off the table. They know that they ain't got nothing else to negotiate with, so they holding on to the debt ceiling. Absolutely. Because it comes back up every couple of years, so it gives them an ace in the hole. So
I have nothing, because you guys just basically said everything I had to say. So I have nothing. So next.
Yeah. So the debt ceiling, again, it did not fit into the narrative that they were pushing, as well as the agenda that they were pushing. So it just wasn't a thing. It's only a thing because it can be used, it can be weaponized as a tool against the other party.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, I think what gets lost in that is the amount of stress and tension and pressure it causes to everyday American citizens who are left wondering, am I going to be working next week or a month from now? And that's really unfortunate, and that's why I say, the people of this country really need to take a hard look at the politics of this country. Because there never should be so few individuals holding an entire country of people hostage because they're not willing to have professional adult conversations, whether we agree or disagree, about what's best for the citizens of this country. And then let's have that discussion so the American people can see us have it publicly. So that way you can't hide behind, fake news, or someone said you said something that you didn't say. Put it out there, put some transparency behind, those conversations and those debates. That's what the American people deserve, and that goes back to the previous question as to why, term limits are probably necessary. People are willing to ride the wave, as long as they can. So yeah, unfortunately, I think that it was just weaponized. So, next question.
All right. Question number 6. The United States seemed to have been at its best when communities stood together. Hold on, am I? Okay, all right, good. When communities stood together, what do you think it will take for us to get back to some form of togetherness that is built upon community? Are we too global minded, and physically segregated to be interested in building that again.
Term limits. Term
Yeah,
limits.
and I can be quick on this one too, actually. And I do think that at this point, the way that things are going, unless something changes, which I don't think it will in my lifetime, I think we are too capitalistic, and I don't know that we can really get back to that at this point, right? And then I think for those who may not have a capitalistic mindset, right, and want, they want some sort of some form of, dare I use the S word, socialism or something other than capitalism. A lot of them are jumping ship because they've adopted the mindset of if we can't beat them, join them, right? And they feel like we can't beat them. So at this point, I might as well get my piece of the pie. And trying to fight against a losing battle, which is capitalism, is preventing me from getting my piece of the pie. So, and then that causes people like that oftentimes to vote for people like Trump, right? And I think that many people who, well, I know because I actually, Felicia and I have a couple of associates, some are now ex associates, who voted for Trump. They didn't share his racist, sexist, xenophobic ideals, but they knew that he was going to make their wallets fatter, right? And that outweighed his racism, his sexism, and all his other immoral values, right? Which in my case just makes them accomplices. But so, yeah, I think that I don't think that we can get back to that anytime soon because there's just too much divisiveness in this country right now.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And I think the second part of the question, the 6B, are we too globally minded and physically segregated to be interested in building again? I think that really speaks to it because, you know, that's really the essence of, we start to show we're all military members and we understand how once we got outside of all of that, how we're different and what the outside world, how impactful and effective that we were able to be. And if we could get back to community, like if we get back to building our own community and then seeing the interlap between other communities when we come together, whether it's bartering or they got people in their community that do services that they don't do in our community, and you start to see that the struggles that your neighbors have are real, but we understand that they said the next health crisis is going to be depression because people are segregated and separated, and we get all of our news from digital corporate sources that have agendas, and we're up here raging against the machine when we have a neighbor who we could go and find similar interests and build together with. But no, we're on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook cussing everybody out and talking about how the world has gone to hell. And a lot of times we don't build that community organically anymore because we're distracted, we're segregated, and we're separated. And I believe, one, it is easy to feel hopeless. I mean, at the end of the day, it's social construct. Any number of calamities or situations could change the social construct. Electricity could go out worldwide, and now we have to learn how to build fire and all this other stuff. So, like, if you interrupt the social construct, you could get back. But does it have to be that dire of a situation for us to get back? I think there's hope, and I think that there's potential, but I will recognize that the state that we live in now, with how we're separated, is that we don't value building in communities the same way as we once did. And that is the easiest way to keep us separated, is if you keep all the talking points from a corporate standpoint that is able to manipulate how we feel about things, instead of us being hands-on and really knowing how we feel about our neighbor and how we feel about the people in our community and what we want to do here locally, instead of and I'll say this, and I'll get off my get off my soapbox. But somebody said, like, when you think about the construct of America, like, is there there's probably as much, if not more, difference between Utah and New Jersey than there is between Italy and Germany, two different countries, and they just two different states in the same country. And so we're all like so spread out. Like, why would somebody somewhere else be worried about something nationally? If we got community focused, it would bring us closer to seeing how close and how human we actually are. And so I think it's that division and that gap that makes it real tough for
Well,
Good
just
point.
piggybacking on what you just said, John, it's like, um, everybody has to come together. We're all more similar than we are different, but we tend to stick with ourselves. I just was sitting here thinking, I'm like, the last time that we all really stood together was 9/11 to me. But it's going to take a complete change of mindset in all of the communities, and say, we're all in this together, and we all have to come together. We're all Americans, and let's make this work, instead of folks worrying about, okay, well, I'm just going to worry about my community, or I'm not going to worry about those folks over there. So that's really all I had on that one.
Yeah. So a couple things. I think there's been a severe erosion of the development of interpersonal skills. Uh, so social media has kind of destroyed some of that. So people don't need to know in their minds how to come together and build that sense of community, because it can all be done online, right? And quite honestly, you know, if if say Kevin and I are going to have a conversation that we knew we were going to be on opposite ends of the spectrum regarding the topic, are we still willing to sit down and have that conversation? Uh, and I think, unfortunately, there's a severe lack of respect and appreciation for our differences, uh, when it really should serve as an opportunity to learn about those differences. Case in point, I was talking to a furniture salesman who had just come back off an assignment where they sent him to Utah to train some salespeople and open a new store. And he said that on the first day, this is a community about 45 minutes outside Salt Lake City. On the very first day, the very first customer that came in the store approached him and said, "You know, the darker your skin, the greater the curse on you." That was his introduction to the state of Utah, the community outside Salt Lake City. And he said he was just dumbfounded. He went to the general manager and let them know that he needed to go home as soon as possible. And I say that to say that, sometimes when communities are built, people don't want outsiders, or folks that they consider to be outsiders, to even patronize their establishments or come in their communities at all. And it's unfortunate, but and we've been to a lot of different states, uh, and met a lot of different people. And I will tell you, the one thing that's always jumped out to me was learning about the strong sense of community, how it was built, why it's important to the people in that community. Uh, and I just think that there's not much of an appreciation for that. And that's the unfortunate part, because I think it stunts our growth, plain and simple. And I'll turn it over.
Yeah, I just believe at the end of the day, if we embrace some of these same people that we're trying to keep out of the country, because I know the United States, we're smart and we feel like we have all the answers, but we actually have people in other parts of the world that can actually bring some good ideas. Um, and let them come, let them establish their communities. Because at the end of the day, if one community is doing well, it's going to impact other communities. And basically, what Rob was saying, that ignorance, eventually, that ignorance is going to have to be out of here at some point in time. We hope, but it seems like sometimes some things get even more ignorant. But if we just learn how maybe to just embrace people that are different, I think United States will be fine with the growth, with the global economy. If we just wouldn't be so ignorant to change or so ignorant to new ideas, I think we would be a whole lot better off.
All right, cool. Question 7. Do you have the same interest in flying to destinations today that you had 5 years ago? If not, why not? And what would it take to change your perspective? For me, I mean, my we just had this conversation right in the last episode about the importance of travel, and I kind of stated how travel is probably the largest reason as to why I am the person that I am today. And that's never going to change, right? I'm always going to want to travel. That's something that I don't foresee ever, ever, ever changing. So my desire or my interest to travel and go to destinations is the same as 5 years ago. However, the same destinations, now that's a bit different, right? Because while I'm the type of person who will tell you I want to see the entire world, um, some of the places that I would have gone 5 years ago, I absolutely can't go to now, right? And even and wouldn't want to, even if I could, right? I mean, you think about Ukraine, right? Just going to the Ukraine 5 years ago, that would have been something that I would have done. Not now, right? Belarus borders Russia and Ukraine. So even though they may not be in the middle of it, they're just too close to what's happening. So I wouldn't go there. You think about Iran. Iran is a place that I hear is just gorgeous and a place that I would like to go. But last year when Masa Amini, 22-year-old Masa Amini, was brutally murdered at the hands of Iran's morality police for not wearing a hijab, right? And so things, when that happened, it caused kind of this domino effect of things. And so there's a lot of unrest going on in Iran right now that wasn't necessarily happening five um 5 years ago. So yeah, while my interest in travel is still the same, definitely not the same exact locations. And that's always going to be a moving target, right? Based upon civil unrest and different things that may be going on in a particular country. So
Yeah. So I, echo that sentiment as well. Interest in flying to destinations is practically the same. However, because of the changes in the world,
yeah.
and the world's view, and quite honestly, the world's opinions, even of Americans,
Yeah. Yeah.
causes you to think and sometimes pause as to whether or not you're willing to take that risk associated with, traveling abroad, especially. Uh, but yeah, but I agree. The interest in seeing parts of the world, and even parts of this country that are absolutely breathtaking, is
For
still
sure.
there. I just think that now, and then also I will tell you that, uh, being a little older, I think your perspective changes somewhat as well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Or at least I would
Yeah.
say mine,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, if I was in my 20s, be like, yeah, whatever, let's do it. Now you're like, no, I don't think I really want to go to Haiti right now. right?
Right.
Especially if I can't carry my own weapons. So, so yes, I think that, it certainly has changed some.
Those are my answers too. Like, yeah, I'm still interested. I still want to get out, but in some places I'm like, yo, I'm watching the news. Like, man, it may be overblown, but you know what? I'm not gonna be the one to go over there and debunk those myths. I got to, I got people that want me
Right.
to come home. So
Shoot, you ain't got to leave the United States. You still got some sundown towns in the United
Yeah,
States.
right.
Hmm.
Let's have that
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, for
No,
sure. Yeah.
nope. That's it for me. There's some sundown towns.
Well, I'll make it 5 for 5. Yeah, I still have the same interest that I had 5 years ago, but there are some places that I would think twice, 3 times before I go. But I'm hoping things will change and that we can start planning. So yeah.
5 for 5. All right. Question 8. What do we need to do a better job of to prepare the generations coming behind us to have a more fulfilling and sustained quality of life in America? Are there enough are there enough of us willing to sacrifice to do so?
Yeah, first get those term limits implemented.
Always comes back to the term limits.
Back to the
I
term
mean,
limit.
Hmm.
a lot of it does because
Yeah.
so many voices are muted, unfortunately. And that's really the saddest part. Let the voices be heard. And no, they're not gonna always agree with you, but at least hear them out, and have that healthy debate about what's best for whom. But yeah, so I think that's one. And then just as far as the generations, uh, they have their own minds, thoughts, opinions, suggestions, ideas on how they think life should happen. So I think, for instance, for our generation, uh, trying to, as I try to do when I talk to young people, help them to understand what some of those differences are. Even when I talk to my own kids, like, yeah, you have opportunities that maybe my generation didn't have, but because of the sacrifices that were made, just like the generation before us, we were able to achieve things that maybe we would not have been able to do. So, so having an appreciation for that, and then just build upon that, you know. So, I'm like young people now. You look in schools, how many of them can even write cursive? I
Yeah.
don't even know if they teach it
I
anymore.
don't think they
I don't
teach it.
think so.
They
Yeah.
certainly don't know how to balance a checkbook. I mean, there's just
Yeah.
some fundamental things that, like there's an app for that. I don't need to learn it if there's an app for it, you know?
Yeah.
So, so just from that perspective, I think that those are some of the things we can do uh, in a sustained quality of life. Uh, I think that's different as well. I talk to some young people that literally have no interest in owning a home. Just not something that they necessarily desire. They want to be able to pick up and move whenever they want to. Uh, and it's the same way about, whether or not they feel like they need to have a life partner.
Yeah. Yep.
Some just don't see it as something that they have to have.
Yep.
So I think those are some differences. And what I would just say to people is that, only you can determine what success looks like for you, uh, and whatever quality living is like for you. is based on your perspective as well. So uh, go forth and live the best life that you think's possible for you. So that's all that I have on that course.
And before I answer the question, my quick answer to that, Rod, you said something. You talked about not writing in cursive. It made me think. I just saw a comedian on Instagram the other day who was saying how she was like, these young people these days, like they don't know how to write in cursive, they don't know how to read a map. She was like, if they ever took over the country, we would easily get it back. All we got to do is write our plans in cursive on a map, and we'll get the country right back. I'm like, that is accurate. But yeah, no, for me, again, this is a quick one. I think that what we have to do, right, to help the generations behind us is one, keep voting. We got to keep speaking up, keep speaking out, keep having conversations, right? Keep donating, keep reading and educating ourselves, as well as educating others regarding kind of what's going on in this world and what can be done to affect change, right? There are more things, but that's kind of the crux of it for me.
All right. I real quick, I had one thing I put down here. Rod always talks about education, educating the younger folks. So that's what I definitely had down. Educating them, teaching them to support our own businesses, and even start their own. And then trying to keep the money within our own communities instead of spending our dollars in everybody else's community. It's not worrying about ours. But that's really what I had on that this topic.
All right.
Yeah, just ditto on everything y'all said. Everything from starting businesses to voting, um, finding out what's your niche is. I think that's one thing we can do is the next generation teaching them to first of all let them know it's okay for them to be different. I think too many times we have people we want to put them into a box.
Yeah.
This do it this way, do that. No, it's okay for you to be different, but once you find what makes you different and what works for you, find all the information you can that's going to make you successful in being different.
See that look Byron had on his face when he was done? He was like, "Yeah, I meant that." Yeah, everything y'all said, I do think. I think we fall into the fallacy of believing that we passed on all the pertinent information that we need to pass on. Like we kind of assume some of the stuff that they got, and I just think that we need to just be sure that we're really passing it on because we know that we live in a society that sells problems instead of solving problems. And when we look at some of the big problems in our society, they're actually not one big problem, but they're a collection of small problems that can be solved with everybody doing their part. But when you sell it as one big problem that we can never find a solution to. And so, as long as we're empowering these generations coming up with the fact that, hey, you don't have to have $1 million to make a change. You don't have to have Congress people or the president in your pocket to be able to make a change. Like you can actually impact change by doing the things that are in your sphere of influence to do, and that happening collectively. So, letting them know that they do have the power because they absolutely can have a better quality of life, not only individually, but collectively. And so remind them of that, to encourage them of that, and to while we still got our time, because I don't plan on going nowhere no time soon. It's not in my plans.
Yeah.
But do everything that we can to that end also.
Yeah, that's a great point there, John, and I think you stated it perfectly. 'Cause when you look at immigration, that same approach can be taken. When you look at gun reform, common sense gun reform, that same approach can be taken. Uh, so instead of looking at it as this great, big, huge thing that we need to solve, let's do the common sense things first. Let's start from there. You know, anybody with common sense know that AKs and ARs were never meant
Right.
to be flooding the streets of America. It's weapons of war. So anyway, I just want to caveat that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, common sense isn't so common anymore these days, it seems.
Yeah, that's true too.
Common sense
Yeah,
is a superpower these days.
yeah, for real. All right, question 9. What are your thoughts on the Hispanic and Black organizations issuing travel advisories for traveling within the state of Florida? I'll be real quick. On one hand, it sucks, right? Because black businesses and businesses owned by other marginalized groups in Florida are being adversely affected by the ban, right? And so I hate that that's happening to them. But then on the other hand, I totally understand it, because DeSantis is out here just, he just being openly racist. He seems to be drawing up and instituting some new racist policy every day. It seems there's something new, right? And like Trump, he's empowering racists to do the same thing, right? To just do as they please with impunity. And so, for me, I certainly wouldn't recommend anybody, any member of a marginalized group moving here anytime soon. I know people are, but it's not something that I would recommend. But yeah, so yeah, on one hand, I hate it for those businesses because they are losing money. But then on the other hand, I totally understand it and get it and even agree with
Yeah, I think two things. One, um, the GOP party, nothing changes until it affects the bottom line, which is the dollar for them.
it.
Mhm.
Right. Yep.
So that's that. And then second, hopefully this will get those minority communities to start voting. Like, okay, you know what? My vote does matter. And so if these policies are impacting where I live, maybe I need to start voting some of these people out who set these policies. And so hopefully that'll be the positive changes that people say how they'll start thinking how much their vote matters and how
Mhm.
much they can make a change with voting.
I agree, B. And one of the things I put on here, that I support it. Yeah, I hate it for the minority-owned businesses that are suffering. But it definitely, I think the folks really need to start voting, and making their voices heard. Because these politicians got to learn that they can't just wage their own private little war on these on folks because they don't look like them. And it just irritates the hell out of me when I keep hearing, you always see it on the news that when the immigrants are coming here, well, they're coming and taking our jobs. Well, I can drive 10 miles down the road to Plant City and go to a strawberry farm, and the only folks you see out there are brown skinned folks, and they're immigrants. And they're doing the jobs that nobody else is willing to do. As I think
Yeah.
somebody mentioned it earlier, the housing stopped. Building houses stopped. Because that's who's doing a lot of the work. The roofing around here, a lot of that stopped because
Yep.
these immigrants were the main ones that were doing the roofing. So these folks have really got to I'm hoping the big businesses lose enough money where they start losing or start voting against these politicians that they're in bed with, because these policies that they're writing are basically, I want it to irritate to affect their bottom line, but I hate that it's affecting the smaller businesses. But that's all I had on that one, fellas.
Yeah. So unfortunately, uh, and sadly, I think it comes down to this topic of race in America. You know, uh, because quite honestly, there are governors in some states that are there because people voted for them to be there based on their extremist views.
Yep.
Uh, and so a lot of people in America see it as their only way to uh, to save what's left of what hadn't been lost in their minds, right? Because they feel entitled to certain things. Uh, even space, you know. And so what they can't price to keep people out of, they use politics. And that's the unfortunate thing. So you know, the travel advisories, you know, whether it was, you know, real or a ploy, or to get the attention of Black and brown people uh, in their dealings with the state of Florida, uh, is just, you know, a narrative on race in America, that we refuse to have, you know, real dialogue about, right? We'll talk about critical race theory like it's a thing to be afraid of,
Right.
when actually all it is the truth about America that needs to be and should be shared and taught, so that people have all the information. Give me all the information. I can make up my own mind and have my own judgments. Just give me all the information. Don't withhold it. You know. So sad state of affairs on race in America.
I ain't gonna even hold y'all up. I just agree with everything that everybody said. I don't even have anything to add. Y'all hit it nail on the head.
Yeah.
All right, cool beans. So our very last question. With so many young African American men and women doing so well financially in 2023, why do you think they cannot connect into more successful, powerful, and fulfilling unions as a couple? Yeah. Felicia said that I always take an opportunity to throw in something about generations when I can, and she's exactly right. But I mean, why wouldn't I, right? I literally got my PhD on a dissertation that talked about leadership and generations, so I'm kind of an expert on it. But I think to answer this question, right, is kind of twofold because it's it, because as experts, right, we take these generations and well, we take the millennial generation and separate them into subgroups because the millennial generation is so huge. And so there's the older millennials and the younger generations. So I think if you look at the older generations, and I'm talking because the older millennials are now in their 40s, and so I think if you take the older group, let's say between like 36 to 43 years old, right? Those um that group of millennials, they actually are doing this. I think they are forming these kind of successful and powerful unions as a couple. It's the younger ones, right? Those ones who we're talking like 35 and younger, where that's not the case. And I think that has to do with a lot of reasons. And Rod, you actually said it earlier. You talked about how the younger generation, specifically millennials, are not they view marriage and relationships differently than all the generations prior to them. So also though, the millennial generation is notoriously bad with money. They are notoriously poor with money. But that applies to the younger ones, right? And it also applied to the older ones when they were young. And now they are older. They're married. They're better with money. They have kids and they are forming these kind of more powerful unions. But the ones who are like 35 and younger, they still haven't gotten where they need to be with money yet. They aren't married yet. And a lot of that is good because the reason for that, without digressing too much, the reason that the millennial generation feel that way is because they watched our generations, right? Right, the Gen Xers as well as the baby boomers. Those two generations, our generations, have had the worst divorce rate in the history of the world. 50% divorce rate for Gen Xers and baby boomers, right? And so millennials are our kids. They saw that. They saw how that affected us. They saw how it affected family. So it made them view relationships and marriage differently. So they are held out. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, right? I'm not saying 100% of them, but generally speaking, they have held out to get married until later in life, which also is why the divorce rate for millennials is only 25%. And that number is actually declining, right? Because they've done it right by watching us get it wrong. And so, again, I think that the upper half, the older part of that generation, are doing just that and being successful as a couple and running businesses and doing all of these things, whereas the younger ones haven't gotten to that point yet, right? Where they've gotten into these relationships and gotten married and started to manage their money properly. So I tried to go through that as quick as I can. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you could actually carry on because I think that you're spot on, and that question was actually for you, Dr. Kev. So I'm not sure anybody has anything more to add, but
Oh my
I'll just
God.
say I don't. But I certainly appreciate the way that you walked us through that, uh, and it makes sense. It just absolutely makes sense. And I think that probably more people should gain some knowledge and insight uh, to some of the research and the studying you did for your dissertation, because obviously you defended well, but I appreciate that insight. Over.
I appreciate you saying
I
that.
go ahead,
Man,
John.
Kev, when you was talking and boy, yeah, I was like, man, because if you look, I mean, all five of us have a divorce on our resume. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Like what? 60% of us grew up in a home without a father. You know what I mean? So
Right,
it's
right.
like, wow, the proof is in the pudding. It's cold. That was cold work right there, bro. That was nasty work right there. But
Thank
I
you.
think we've built up kind of to this answer also as we've come through some of the other questions. Talking about where we're not interested in building community, the separation, the segregation, just all of these issues. I think it's hard so there's a hill and a valley to it. I think it's hard for young people to see the value in it because they've seen how fantastically we failed. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's hard to look at that. Like
Yeah.
somebody posted and they were talking about why don't young people want to go to church the way that their grandparents did? And somebody replied and they said, I saw my grandmother and my mom go to church every Sunday talking about God's going to be away, and they never had nothing. And they still broke today the same way they were when I was growing up. And they're like, I don't want no part of that. I'm not saying I give up on God, but whatever institution that kept them broke and in the situation that they in, I don't want to be associated with that. And we come from a time where even if you wasn't doing much, if you were an elder, then we're going to take that with something because it meant something. And I think
Right.
some of these guys, they taking this stuff. The empirical evidence ain't here, so I
Right,
ain't
right.
rolling with it. And, I think that it's going to be just kind of like we're phasing into a way that we move. They're going to have to phase into a normal that works for them. And once they kind of can collectively navigate that, because the great point is, later millennials. So we're really talking about Gen Zers now, because later millennials are in their early 40s now. Some of them are like my peers and things like that. So we used to say all these millennials, but they grown, they having grandbabies now. So
Yeah, right.
we got new generations coming in, and I think that they're going to. It is a problem. It is a problem. Dr. Umar Johnson was on a podcast here recently.
Oh
It is
Lord.
going wild and viral because he took these two young guys to task, man, and he talked about it. He said, hey, you got these guys that are coming in here and they talking about, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And he talked about we trying to blame women for a situation that was created by men not being in the homes. And then they were like, well, was it a systemic issue of the men not being in the home? He said, yeah, it was. He said, we don't get to decide the stuff that was outside of us that caused these problems. We get to decide whether we're going to step up and solve the problems or we're going to step away from it. It's an excellent interview. He took them to task. And so I think, it's just going to be one of those things where young people are going to have to decide, what are these problems? That's a problem that African men and African American men and African American women are doing well financially, and we can't create powerful units. But I think we got to step to the plate and say, that's it. That's what he said. He said other races marry with more of a political mindset, whereas we talk about love. And it ain't all about love. Love is important, but if you're building a family, a community, a legacy, there's got to be some politics involved in that. There's got to be some foundational decisions that you make in that relationship. And it ain't just about you make me feel good today. And, I just thought that was a great point, man. We just be like vibes. All right, we married the next day. Let's go to Vegas or go to the courthouse. We don't be thinking about, she can't cook and I like to eat. We don't think about none of that. We just be like, ooh, man, you see what she look like in that sundress? We's married now, and So, man, I'm just blabbing now. Let me get off the mic.
Well, all I got is a quick question for Kev. You said, what was the divorce rate between baby boomers and the Gen Xers?
50.
Man, well, I guess I'm responsible for about 25% of that, ain't I?
What none of us gonna say it.
Wow.
I can make fun of myself. Yeah,
okay, we done.
That's all I had. Like Kev answered it great. So he answered the question perfectly for me. So I just wanted to get that joke in. I had that one was sitting there. I had to take it.
I ain't got nothing to say. I ain't got nothing to say. No, I ain't got nothing to say on that one. It just man, you can start at the top of the list. I mean, you could have, if you like you said, each of us have been successful individuals, and and you run into another person that's successful. And like you said, you may be thinking that that political realm, like John is saying, but then also you got that, oh, well, I need that love thing going on too. And sometimes, depending on what people's background, where they come from, they don't mix. And go back to what he said about church. Some people say, well, I'm not going to church no more because I didn't see the benefit in that. And guess what? You got some people that say, maybe my parents did stay together, but I saw them fight all the time. Or I saw a dysfunctional couple. So I ain't gonna deal with that either. So I mean, it just depends on who the person is, what their background is. Look, I don't discard nobody's story when it comes to trying to connect with somebody. Everybody got their own story, and you just got to find the person that's gonna make it right for you. And as an example that we have, it didn't work the first time or the third time, but some of us the third time. But hey, when you get older, when you learn, when you learn better, you do better.
Yeah, so when you know better, you do better.
That's right.
Well, as I stated earlier, this is going to be our last episode for a little bit anyway. We're going to take a summer break, and we will return bigger and better. And so with that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us today and up to this point of the season. As we wrap up this week's episode, since we have just celebrated Juneteenth, I want to leave you with a quote about freedom by leader, minister, civil rights activist, human rights activist, and my hero, El Haj Malik El Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, who said, "You can't separate peace from freedom because no one can be at peace unless he has his freedom." Until next time, peace.
All right, peace.